found the envelope 3 weeks after the funeral. It was tucked behind a framed photo of us on our wedding day, hidden so carefully that I never would have seen it if I hadn't been packing up his office. My hands were shaking when I pulled it out. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind you use for something important. And inside was a letter. Not to me, to someone named Claire. I didn't know anyone named Claire. But as I read the first line, my entire world tilted sideways. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you finally know the truth. I felt my knees buckle. The man I'd mourned for 22 days, the man I'd loved for 6 years, the man whose grave I visited every morning with fresh flowers, he had secrets. Big ones, the kind that don't just break your heart. They shatter everything you thought you knew about your life. I kept reading. And with every word, I realized that losing him wasn't the tragedy. The tragedy was that I never really knew him at all. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you're alone. Because this story doesn't just hurt, it changes everything you think you know about love. I met Daniel at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. It was one of those rainy October mornings where the air smells like wet pavement and everyone's rushing to get somewhere warm. I was running late for a meeting, juggling my laptop bag and an umbrella that kept flipping inside out. He held the door open for me, smiled, asked if I needed help. I remember thinking he had kind eyes, the kind that made you feel safe. We started talking. He was a financial consultant, recently moved to the city, didn't know anyone yet. I gave him my number. 3 months later, we were inseparable. Daniel was everything I thought I wanted. He remembered the little things, how I liked my coffee, that I hated surprises, but loved spontaneous road trips. He'd leave notes on the bathroom mirror before work. You're going to crush today. I'm the luckiest guy alive. He made me feel seen in a way no one else ever had. My friends loved him. My parents adored him. When he proposed on a beach in Mexico, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes before he finished the question. We got married in a small ceremony surrounded by people who kept saying we were perfect together. And I believed them. I really did. The first year of marriage was bliss. We bought a house with a backyard, talked about kids. He'd come home from work and wrap his arms around me while I was cooking dinner, whispering that he couldn't wait to grow old with me. I felt like I'd won the lottery, like I'd finally figured out what happiness was. But then small things started to shift. He'd stay late at the office more often. His phone was always face down on the table. When I asked about his day, his answers got shorter, vaguer. I told myself it was just stress. Work was demanding. He was tired. I didn't want to be the nagging wife who questioned everything. So I let it go. By year 3, the distance between us felt like an ocean. He'd come to bed hours after me. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and he'd still be downstairs on his laptop. When I asked what he was working on, he'd snap. Just let me handle it, okay? I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. We stopped having sex, stopped talking about anything real. I'd catch him staring at his phone with this look on his face, something between guilt and longing. I wanted to confront him, demand answers, but I was terrified of what I might find, so I buried it, pretended everything was fine, smiled when people asked how we were doing. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a Thursday. Daniel said he had a late meeting and wouldn't be home until after 9. I decided to surprise him. I made his favorite dinner, set the table with candles, put on the dress he'd bought me for my birthday. 9 o'clock came and went, then 10. I called him twice. No answer. By 11, I was furious. I texted him. "Where are you?" He replied an hour later. "Sorry, got held up, be home soon." He walked in just past midnight, and I could smell perfume on his jacket. Not mine, something floral and sweet. I asked him about it. He laughed it off, said one of his colleagues hugged him goodbye, but his eyes didn't meet mine. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there next to him, listening to him breathe, and I felt this horrible certainty settling in my chest. He was lying to me. I didn't know about what, but I knew. The next morning, I went through his phone while he was in the shower. I'm not proud of it, but I had to know. There were deleted messages, entire threads wiped clean. His call log had gaps. And then I found a number that showed up over and over. No name attached, just a number. I memorized it. I didn't confront him. I just watched, waited, tried to catch him in something concrete. But he was careful, too careful. 3 months later, Daniel died. A car accident on his way home from work. A drunk driver ran a red light and hit him head on. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The police came to my door at 11 at night. I remember collapsing, screaming. My whole world ended in that moment. For weeks, I couldn't function. I moved through the funeral like a ghost. People kept telling me how much he loved me, how lucky we were to have had each other. And I just nodded, because what else could I do? Tell them I'd spent the last year suspecting he was cheating, that I didn't even know who my husband really was. I buried my doubts with him, or at least I tried to. Packing up his office was the hardest thing I'd ever done. His books were still on the shelves. His coffee mug sat on the desk, half full and moldy. I started with the easy stuff, papers, files. Then I got to the photos. There was one of us on our honeymoon, laughing on a sailboat. I picked it up, and something fell out from behind the frame. The envelope, plain white, no name on the outside. I opened it without thinking, and that's when my entire reality crumbled. The letter was written in Daniel's handwriting, addressed to Claire, and the first line made my blood run cold. "My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you finally know the truth." My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the paper. I sat down on the floor of his office, my back against the wall, and I forced myself to keep reading. "Claire, I know this will come as a shock, but you deserve to know who your father really was. Father." The word hit me like a punch to the stomach. Daniel had a daughter he never told me about, a daughter named Claire. I felt bile rising in my throat. How could he keep something like this from me? We talked about having kids, about starting a family, and the whole time he already had one. The letter went on. Daniel explained that he'd gotten his high school girlfriend pregnant when they were 17. Her name was Amanda. They'd planned to get married, raise the baby together, but Amanda's parents had other ideas. They were wealthy, controlling, and they didn't want their daughter tied to some poor kid with no prospects. So they paid Daniel off, gave him $50,000 to disappear and never contact Amanda or the baby again. He was young, scared. He took the money. He said it was the biggest mistake of his life. But by the time he realized that, Amanda had moved across the country and he had no way to find her. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, staring at the words, trying to process what I was reading. Daniel had a daughter. He'd abandoned her, taken money to walk away from his own child, and he never told me, not once in 6 years of being together. I thought about all the times we'd talked about our future, how he'd said he couldn't wait to be a dad, how he'd hold my hand and tell me our kids would have my eyes. Was he thinking about her when he said those things? Was he trying to make up for what he'd done? The letter continued. Daniel wrote that he'd spent years trying to find Claire. He hired private investigators, searched social media, but Amanda had covered their tracks well. Then, about 2 years ago, Claire found him. She'd done one of those DNA tests, and his information popped up as a match. She reached out through the website. At first, he didn't respond. He was terrified, ashamed, but she kept trying. Eventually, he replied. They started talking, emailing at first, then phone calls. And finally, they met in person. That's when everything clicked into place. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the perfume on his jacket. It wasn't an affair, it was his daughter. Daniel had been seeing Claire for almost 2 years, and I had no idea. He wrote that he wanted to tell me, that he almost did 100 times, but he was scared. Scared I'd judge him for what he'd done. Scared I'd leave him. Scared I'd think less of him. So he kept it hidden. He built this whole separate life with his daughter and never let me in. I felt so many things at once. Anger that he'd lied to me. Betrayal that he didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. But also this deep, aching sadness. Because Daniel had been carrying this guilt for decades. He'd made a terrible choice when he was just a kid, and it haunted him for the rest of his life. And instead of letting me help him carry that weight, he'd suffered alone. We could have figured it out together. I would have understood. I would have supported him. But he never gave me that chance. The letter ended with instructions. There was a safety deposit box at a bank downtown. The key was taped to the back of the envelope. Inside the box, I'd find everything I needed to contact Claire. Daniel wrote that he'd set up a trust fund for her. Half of his life insurance payout was supposed to go to her. He'd made arrangements with his lawyer, but if something happened and the lawyer couldn't reach her, he wanted me to make sure she got what was hers. He also wrote that Claire knew about me, that he'd told her how much he loved me, that he hoped, somehow, we could meet, that maybe I could tell her things about him that she didn't know. I sat on that floor for hours, just staring at the letter, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of everything. My husband had a daughter, a 24-year-old daughter who existed in the world, and I'd never known about her. I thought about all the times I'd suspected him of cheating, how I'd convinced myself he was having an affair, and the whole time he was just trying to be a father, trying to make up for the years he'd lost. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to rage at his grave for keeping this from me. But another part of me just felt incredibly sad. Sad for Daniel. Sad for Claire. Sad for the family we could have been if he'd just told me the truth. I found the key taped to the envelope, just like he said. The next morning, I went to the bank. My hands were shaking as I opened the safety deposit box. Inside was a thick manila folder. Photos of Claire as a baby, as a toddler. School pictures that Amanda must have sent him over the years, back before he signed away his rights. Then more recent photos. Claire as a teenager, a young woman. In some of them, she was with Daniel. I recognized the coffee shop where they must have met. A park I'd never been to. They were smiling. She looked so much like him. Same dark hair, same crooked smile. It was like looking at a ghost. There were also letters, dozens of them. Emails printed out and stored carefully. I read through them, my heart breaking with every word. Claire writing about her childhood, how she'd always felt like something was missing, how finding Daniel had filled a hole she didn't even know she had. Daniel responding with apologies, with love, with promises to be there for her. They'd been planning to tell me together. They'd set a date. 2 weeks after the accident, they were going to invite me to dinner and break the news. Daniel wrote to Claire that he was nervous but ready, that he knew I'd understand, that I had a big heart. I felt like the world's biggest fool. All those months, I'd been suspicious. All those times I'd checked his phone, looked through his emails, convinced he was betraying me. And he was just trying to fix the biggest mistake of his life. I'd been so wrapped up in my own insecurity that I'd never considered there might be another explanation. I judged him without even knowing what I was judging him for. And now he was gone. There was no way to apologize, no way to tell him I understood, no way to meet Claire together like he'd wanted. At the bottom of the folder was a piece of paper with Claire's contact information, her phone number, her address, an email, and a note from Daniel. Please don't hate me for this. I should have told you from the beginning, but I was a coward. If you can find it in your heart, please reach out to Claire. She's an amazing person, and I think you two would really like each other. She needs family, and so do you. I'm sorry I'm not there to make this easier. I love you both more than anything in this world. I drove home in a daze. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, just staring at Claire's phone number. What was I supposed to say? Hi, I'm your dead dad's widow. I'm sorry he kept me a secret. I didn't know about you, but I'm not angry. It all felt impossible. But I knew I had to do it. For Daniel, for Claire, for myself. I needed to know who this girl was. This person who'd been such a huge part of my husband's life without me ever realizing it. So I picked up my phone. I typed out a message, deleted it, typed another one, deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote the truth. Hi Claire, my name is Emma. I was married to Daniel. I found his letter. Can we talk? She responded in less than 5 minutes. I've been waiting for you to reach out. Yes, please, when? We agreed to meet at a cafe the next day. Neutral ground. Somewhere public in case things got emotional or awkward. I barely slept that night. I kept imagining what she'd be like, what she'd think of me, if she blamed me for something. I didn't even know what I'd done, but the guilt was there anyway. I got to the cafe 15 minutes early, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, just sat there, watching the door, my stomach in knots. When Claire walked in, I recognized her immediately. She looked exactly like the photos, but seeing her in person was different. She was real, solid, and she looked just as nervous as I felt. She spotted me and walked over slowly. We just stared at each other for a moment. Then she smiled. It was Daniel's smile, that same crooked, slightly shy grin that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. Emma, she said softly. I nodded. She sat down across from me, and for a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Finally, she spoke. I'm so sorry about Daniel. I know this must be incredibly hard for you. Her voice was gentle, careful, like she was afraid I might break. And honestly, I felt like I might. I didn't know where to start. so I just said the first thing that came to mind. I didn't know about you. Claire nodded. I know. He told me he hadn't said anything yet. He was planning to. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Why did he keep you a secret? She looked down at her coffee. He was ashamed of what he did when I was born. He thought you'd think less of him. I shook my head. I wouldn't have. I would have understood. Claire looked up at me. I think he knew that, deep down, but shame makes you do stupid things. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about growing up not knowing who her father was, how her mom had always refused to talk about him, just said he wasn't in the picture. Claire said she'd felt angry about it for years, like she'd been rejected before she even had a chance. Then she'd done the DNA test on a whim, just curious. And when Daniel's name popped up, everything changed. She reached out not knowing what to expect, and he'd responded, slowly at first, but then more openly. She said meeting him in person was one of the best days of her life. She told me about their relationship, how they'd meet for coffee every week, sometimes lunch. He'd taken her to a baseball game. They'd gone to a museum. Simple things a father and daughter do. She said he talked about me all the time, that he loved me more than anything, that he felt horrible for lying, but didn't know how to undo it. Every time he tried to tell me, he'd panic and back out. Claire said he'd finally decided enough was enough, that he was going to tell me everything, that he wanted us all to be a family. And then the accident happened. I asked her the question I'd been afraid to ask. Do you blame me for not knowing, for not somehow figuring it out? She looked at me like I was crazy. Blame you for what? You didn't do anything wrong. Daniel made the choice to keep this secret. That's on him, not you. I felt something loosen in my chest, some tight knot of guilt I'd been carrying. She reached across the table and took my hand. Emma, from everything Daniel told me, you made him happier than he'd ever been. He said you were the best thing that ever happened to him. I don't blame you for anything. I'm just glad I got to meet him before he died. We kept talking. I told her about Daniel, about our life together, the good parts, the way he'd make me laugh, how he'd dance with me in the kitchen while dinner was cooking, the trips we took, the plans we'd made. I told her about the doubts I'd had, how I'd thought he was cheating, how guilty I felt for suspecting him of something he wasn't doing. Claire listened. She didn't judge me. She just nodded. And when I started crying, she handed me a napkin and waited until I was ready to keep going. She asked if she could see the house, the place where Daniel had lived. I said yes. We drove there together. I showed her his office, the spot where I'd found the letter. I gave her some of his things, a watch he'd worn every day, a book he'd loved, a framed photo of the two of them that had been in the safety deposit box. She held that photo like it was the most precious thing in the world, and I realized that in a way it was. It was proof that she'd mattered to him, that he'd loved her, that he'd tried. We talked about the trust fund. I told her I'd make sure she got everything Daniel had set aside for her. She tried to refuse at first, said it didn't feel right taking money from his estate. But I insisted. It's what he wanted. And honestly, it felt like the least I could do. Daniel had made a mistake when he was 17, but he'd spent the last 2 years of his life trying to fix it. And now it was my job to finish what he'd started. Over the next few weeks, Claire and I kept in touch. We'd meet for coffee, text each other random things. She told me stories about her childhood. I told her stories about Daniel. Slowly, we started building something, not a replacement for what we'd lost, but something new, a connection, a friendship, maybe even a kind of family. I realized that Daniel had been right. Claire was an amazing person, smart, kind, funny, and I could see so much of him in her. We were sitting in my living room, looking through old photo albums. Claire stopped on a picture of Daniel and me on our wedding day. She stared at it for a long time. Then she said, "Do you think he would have been a good dad? If he'd been around when I was growing up." I thought about it, really thought about it. And I said, "Yes, I think he would have been incredible. He was patient, thoughtful. He remembered the little things. He would have loved you so much." She wiped her eyes. "I think he did love me, even though he didn't get to show it for a long time." I realized something in that moment. Losing Daniel had been devastating. It had broken me in ways I didn't think I could recover from. But finding out about Claire, that wasn't another loss. It was a gift, a piece of him that was still here, still alive, still growing and changing and being a part of the world. And maybe that was what Daniel had wanted all along, for the two of us to find each other, to hold on to each other, to keep his memory alive together. I asked Claire if she wanted to visit his grave with me. She said yes. We went the next morning. I brought flowers like I always did. Claire brought a letter she'd written. She read it out loud, her voice shaking. She told him she forgave him, that she understood why he'd done what he'd done, that she was grateful for the time they'd had together, even if it was too short, that she wished she could have had more. When she finished, she folded the letter and tucked it under a stone by his headstone. We stood there together, two women who loved the same man in different ways, and we cried. Truth is, I thought losing Daniel was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. And it was. It destroyed me. But finding out about Claire, that was complicated. It hurt. It made me question everything I thought I knew about my marriage. But it also gave me something I didn't expect. A connection, a purpose, a way to keep Daniel's memory alive that felt real and meaningful. Claire wasn't a betrayal. She was a second chance. A chance for Daniel to make things right, even from beyond the grave. And a chance for me to be part of something bigger than my own grief. I still miss him every single day. I still wake up some mornings and forget that he's gone. I still reach for him in bed and feel that crushing emptiness when I remember he's not there. But now, when I think about Daniel, I don't just think about what I lost. I think about Claire, about the relationship they built, about the courage it took for him to face his mistakes, about the love he had for both of us. And I think about the fact that even though he's gone, a piece of him is still here. In Claire, in the stories we share, in the life we're building together. Daniel wasn't perfect. He lied to me. He kept secrets. He let fear control him when he should have been honest. But he was also human, flawed and complicated, and trying his best to fix something he'd broken a long time ago. And in the end, he did fix it. Not the way he planned, not the way any of us wanted, but he brought Claire and me together. He made sure we'd find each other. And maybe that was his way of saying sorry, his way of making sure we wouldn't be alone. I thought losing him was everything. I thought it was the end of my story, but it wasn't. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I got to know a part of Daniel I never knew existed, one where I gained something I didn't even know I was missing. Claire isn't a replacement for what I lost. She's her own person, her own story, but she's also a connection to the man I loved. And that means everything. So yes, I found the hidden truth, and it hurt, God, it hurt so much. But it also healed something I didn't know was broken. It gave me a reason to keep going, to honor Daniel's memory in a way that actually matters. And it taught me that sometimes the things we think will destroy us are actually the things that save us. Claire saved me, and I think, in some small way, I saved her too. We're family now, not by blood or by law, but by choice, by shared loss, by love. And that's more than I ever expected to find in the wreckage of my grief.